Trugoy's eating yogurt in the green room.
Just all the yogurt you can possibly imagine.
No alcohol needed. I just need some Dannon.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of 1001 Album Complaints. This is the podcast where lifelong friends, musicians, and guys that have been barred from family gatherings for complaining too much get together to talk about albums from Robert Dimery's list of 1001 albums you must hear before you die. We are going to give a little background on the artist and talk about the making of this album. We're going to do a deep dive on some individual tracks. So if you're not familiar with this album, don't worry. We're going to give you enough that you are able to play along with us. We are going to complain and going to make fun of this band. In case the name of the podcast did not clue you in, we are music fans. We love music. We respect the craft, but we all know that there is a lot to make fun of in any artistic endeavor. And after we are done giving our well-researched cheap shots, we are going to vote and tell you whether or not you really do need to hear this album before you die. Now, this week, we are covering an album that our old friend Robert Christgau said is maddeningly disjunct, but also said is radically unlike any rap you or anybody else has heard. We are, of course, talking about the debut album from De La Soul, 3 Feet High and Rising. Now, to give you an idea of what we have been listening to this week, we are going to play a clip from what I personally think is the coolest song on this album. This is the song I Know.
Greetings, girl, and welcome to my world of phrasing right up to bat. It's the daisy age and you're about to walk top stage, so wipe your lottos on the mat. Hip-hop love this is, and don't mind when I quiz your involvements before the sun. But clear your court, cause this a one-man sport, and who's better for this than plug one? Don't have to worry about me squashing other deals, cause they've already been squished. Freeze a frame of our moves the same, wish we can continue right behind the bush. You'll stay with me, I know this, but not because of all my earthly treasures, or regardless to the fact that I'm past the noose, but because
All right, now that we have level set, I'm going to throw it around the room, and our cast of complainers are going to give their introduction by way of a particularly mean tweet-length review. And I'm going to throw it first to Rob.
Thanks so much, Tom. Excited to get into it. Here is my tweet-length review. It is pithy and short.
Unlike this album?
Unlike this album, exactly. Here we go. A tribe called Meh.
Oh, burn. All right, Marty, what do you got for us?
What is up, Tom? What is up, everybody? Here is my tweet. This album is every lawyer's favorite because each track contains a minimum of 5 potential lawsuits.
Nice. And I am Tom. I will be taking us through these floodwaters that is the life and times of De La Soul. And my tweet-length review is, to say that 3 Feet High and Rising is an uneven album is like saying Charles Manson is a little intense. You could get whiplash hopping between the amazingly rich and lovely songs and the not even quarter-baked sketches of ideas that somehow end up on this excessively long album. At the end, you are left wondering, are De La Soul musical visionaries forming a new path for an emerging art form that is hip-hop, or are they a bunch of nerdy-ass kids run amok in a studio with no adult supervision? The answer to both is yes.
Damn.
So, what do y'all think of the album? How was your week?
Yeah, I'm pretty aligned with what you just said, Tom. It was so bloated and had so many potholes along the road that, frankly, it was just hard to enjoy. I think the production, the beats, if you will, the Prince Paul aspect, or what I think is the Prince Paul force, creative force behind it, was really, really cool. I really enjoyed a lot of what was going on there. I thought the flows on top of it were uneven, let's say. But really the biggest problem was just how many obstacles you got to dodge to get to the good songs.
Yeah, it was kind of just like throw everything at the wall, and instead of seeing what sticks, include it on the album.
Yeah. No,
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
It's a frustrating listen.
Totally.
Is what I'd call it, because I really wanted to like it, and there is plenty of stuff I like, but they keep breaking up their own momentum.
Yeah. I think that, Rob, you are right that Prince Paul had a huge impact on the density of the sampling, but also Maceo had a big impact on the baseline samples. And so what happened with a lot of them was that they had, as a group, the three of them, come up with these songs, and Prince Paul took them into the studio and refined it and added a lot of layers.
It's funny because there's no bass. There's no bass tonality that comes through on any of the songs. You can't bump this on your subwoofers in your ACK or whatever.
Yeah, this is definitely putting that kind of like 808 sound underneath it, that boo, 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 like this was just soundscapes from samples. And I do think that the soundscapes work really well. You're right, it is not what one traditionally thinks of as this beat heavy hip hop. It's not head noddy music type of feel to it, but I gotta say there's a lot of charm on the album. Sure. And that's the thing that I, especially in listening to their story or learning about their story, I came to appreciate that these were like 17, 18, 19-year-old kids who kind of just got thrown into a situation where they had access to a studio and a guy in Prince Paul who was a little bit older and a little bit more knowledgeable and willing to walk them through. And Prince Paul, and even to give them credit, Tommy Boy Records, who they signed with, were like, you guys are a bunch of fucking lovable nerds, and just be lovable nerds. That's all that we want you to do. Don't try to be something you're not. And I think that shines through really nicely on this album.
Totally. I think, Tom, that you're right when you use the word charming. It's very, very charming. The lyrics are different than any other sort of hip hop things that you would hear. They almost don't make sense. It's almost like they invented their own language that only they kind of can understand. And I appreciate that. There's a lot of, at first listen, I'm like, oh, this is kind of nonsensical, but when you read the lyrics, you're like, oh, they have their own thing going on that's very unique to them that I like.
I totally agree. They come off as very charming, cool, fun guys that I would happily have a beer with. And it's almost to the point of being wholesome.
Yeah.
This is a throwback to an era where hip hop could be very almost akin to kids music or something that you might hear on Sesame Street, right? And they have this very playful design aesthetic, clearly is part of it. So again, yeah, I like them personally. Their personalities came through on the record, and I get the part where they're nerds. I think this is one of those examples where I do really need the context of the story you're going to tell me where this fits in the puzzle that is hip hop, to tell me that this is a first of its kind or an only of its kind. But in my head, I guess the complaint would be that I kept comparing it to A Tribe Called Quest's first album, which I believe came out in the same year. I know they're part of the same circles. Mm-hmm. To be honest, I just think that's much better.
What's weird is that, the things I read about this album is that this kind of style of hip hop is that it's positive versus like gangster rap that was happening at the same time. But I think that's an unfair word or an inaccurate word to call this. There's nothing particularly positive. It's not negative, but it seems like it's more just kind of like insular or some other word that describes just kind of their own little world that they've created and that they rap about. There's
a lot of in-jokes here. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that has come up in multiple reviews of them is that it has a suburban feel to it. They're not singing about the streets. They're just a couple of nerdy middle class kids living in suburbia, making songs to make themselves laugh and talking about the in-jokes that they all have. And it lives and dies based upon how much you like them as people. I would definitely agree with that. If you don't like them as people, that comes off as stupid and trite.
Yeah, but why wouldn't you like them as? I mean, they don't give you enough to like them or dislike them as people.
I sort of somewhat disagree. I take the same issue that Marty did. I think they seem like really cool people, and hence I want to like them. And in fact, I will probably listen to it again in an attempt to go a little deeper on this, especially after I hear the backstory we're going to get into. But there's also a real lack of sophistication. Like you said, they're real young guys, first time in the studio. It's definitely seems like a direction that hip hop just did not follow. And so it's a little harder to identify them as the start of some kind of movement. I'm just vamping here a little bit, but that's sort of my take.
Sure.
So whereas the production feels very forward thinking, the flows and the raps generally seem very mired in a time and place.
I kind of agree. I kind of disagree. I kind of think that the samples and the production and the beats are very kind of artistically put together. And I think that their flows are kind of artistic too. And it's just like, just because it's so different, there's something about it that's so different to me that I'm like, this is unlike anything else. And I feel the same way about both the rapping and the flow, and also the way the beats are strung together. Two things. One thing I immediately thought about is the Dust Brothers, because we talked about them doing, lots of work with Beck and other ones, finding kind of obscure samples and mashing them together in these kind of unimaginable way, which they do really well on this album. They string together kind of different songs and different samples to make something unique, and it makes sense.
The sound of it is absolutely unique. I have very few, if any, complaints about the production itself.
The quality of the samples and the quality of the production is very poor.
Yeah, but that was just an artifact of the time.
Sure.
Yeah. And, interestingly, you bring up the Dust Brothers because there is a story that the Beastie Boys heard 3 Feet High and Rising when they were like 80% of the way done with Paul's Boutique. And they seriously considered deleting everything and starting over from scratch because of the sampling that they heard on this. They landed the ship with Paul's Boutique clearly.
Yeah.
But it was a step forward.
There does feel like there's a sort of spiritual connection between those two records, though.
Right. And you also have to remember that you're at the beginning of this thing. And my comment about quality, obviously I recognize and respect that this is a very new thing that people are doing, kind of mashing different samples from other songs into something new.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I do really think that the word that I used repeatedly in my notes is the sampling is additive. You get into that West Coast G-Funk style, and it's just, they just took a song and put a rap over it and used it almost whole cloth. And it's cool, it's funky, but it's not additive in the way that this is additive. They really took these components and made them into something entirely new when it was all put together. And I did think that was not only impressive, but just cool. Like it came across as very cool when they did it right. And Rob, you talked a little bit about the debut Tribe Called Quest album, People's Instinctive Travels and the Paths of Rhythm, but that came out in 1990. And this album, although it was released in February of 1989, they were releasing singles for this album all the way back to like June of 88. So this was getting worked on a lot earlier. And so this was definitely pre-Tribe Called Quest and was a huge influence on the way that Tribe Called Quest went about trying to approach sampling. They didn't go as layered. I think they focused a little bit more on getting better lyrically. Because I would say that, you said that their flow is of a time and place, and yes, this is still very AABBCC rhyme scheme.
It's like almost a transitional.
Yeah,
the lyrical content to me is more interesting than how it's delivered.
Yes. Now they have good timbre to their voices. Like their voices sound pleasant. They do kind of sound similar enough that I get lost who was rapping at any given time. Yeah. Luckily, they say their fucking names a whole lot, so that helps. But I do think that if you look at the evolution of hip hop, I mean, nowadays You get somebody like, like MF Doom with like, rap snitches, knishes and all that shit.
Nowadays, I mean, that's not nowadays is
That's
like
not nowadays.
future.
That guy's dead, actually. So, yeah. Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like there has been an evolution of lyricism in hip hop that you can definitely tell that this is just early style. And everybody kind of sounded similar to this in terms of their rhyming structure. They had unique subject matters, certainly.
Yeah. I think this is one of those places where the context is super, super important, and even the months of a given year matter, to your point, Tom. So that's definitely important context, that this is for sure before things like A Tribe Called Quest. And, our job here is always to attempt, hard as it may be, to put yourself inside a cultural moment and to at least think for a moment about what it was like to actually listen to this right when it hit the streets, which is just inherently different than listening to it 40 years later.
Yes, absolutely. Especially at a time when hip hop was less accessible to broader audiences. And I think that one of the things that this did is it did allow a wider swath of people to appreciate hip hop, because they were coming from similar circumstances to most of the record buying public, just middle class suburban kids, as opposed to, you're really telling the story of my life in the streets. And that absolutely has a place. But if you're a 14-year-old, maybe you think that that's kind of cool and edgy. If you're a 25-year-old, you're probably not super into that in 1989. You want something that's a little bit more accessible. And so I do think that it helped to broaden the scope of who was listening to hip hop. And I mean, like shit like the Fresh Prince was already out and stuff like that. So it wasn't exactly like the first to do that, but I do think that it was an important kind of milestone in that step closer to the center.
Tom, I think that's important what you're saying, because I think there is, and you'll tell us, a context where this could be an example of people just making music for themselves, or like trying to hang out with their friends and just come up with something. And then we're finding a formula that works and then having it get popular, right?
Yeah.
It feels very homegrown or like grassroots.
I'll admit to a gap here, because you just mentioned Fresh Prince, and I had He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper, and listened to it quite a bit when I was, 10. And I'm just looking it up. That came out, a little before this, but it is kind of a good touchstone to say something about where hip hop was. I know that sounds sacrilegious, but there's some connection there for sure.
Yeah. And Rob, to your point earlier about, is this the start of something? A lot of people look at this album and say it was the beginning of alternative hip hop. And we covered alternative hip hop on the Jurassic 5 episode a while back. It's a label that is so broad as to almost be meaningless, because it really just means hip hop that is not chasing the current trend and kind of doing its own thing. But I think that this set a template for artists to be able to say, I can go my own way and still be successful. And I can not have to conform to what is popular just to get a record label or just to get plays. And I do think that that is important. It's like, kind of the indie version of hip hop. Like, you just kind of, like you said, Marty, it's just kids making music because it makes them happy. And it turns out that it makes a whole bunch of other people happy, and they end up getting a great career out of it. But I don't get the sense that this was engaged in with a whole lot of, we have to be stars. We're trying to do this. Like, we got to make it. It was just sort of like, oh, you want to make our album? Fucking cool, man.
Or also like having like or labels throw a bunch of money at it, right?
Yeah. I mean, they did get a record deal, but it was definitely like, they got a record deal on the strength of their demos, which most of them ended up on the album, and they were already really fucking weird. And the record label was kind of just like, just be weird, man. Like, the CEO of Tommy Boy Records, the founder of Tommy Boy Records, there was a quote from him where he heard their demo tapes, and he basically said, these guys are either going to be huge or they're going to go nowhere. And I kind of don't care, because I think that it's unique and I want to support weird art like this. And I was like, that's fucking great, right?
Slow clap for that
seriously.
guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is such a heartwarming record exec kind of story.
And he quickly was fired.
No, I mean, like, Tommy Boy was very successful. There is a story that comes up a little bit later about Tommy Boy and De La Soul that might make you feel a little less warm and fuzzy about him. But let's go ahead and jump into the backstory on De La Soul. And I'm going to warn the audience right ahead of time. There's not a ton of information out there that I was able to find about the backstory for De La Soul. I had to crib a whole bunch of stuff together from a whole bunch of different sources.
You had to fly out and like talk to them like personally.
Yeah. You know, I'm sure they I'm sure love that. And also one of them is dead.
Okay.
But, you know,
You flew to his grave.
I just had to cobble together a lot of sort of oral histories of just people talking about them. And so there's some conflicting information. And so some of this shit might be apocryphal, but I tried to weave a story together from all these disparate sources to try to give you an idea of what was going on in this sort of birth of De La Soul into their debut album. So De La Soul is a trio consisting of Kelvin Mercer, aka Posdnuos, aka Plug One, David Joliker, aka Trugoy the Dove, aka Plug 2, and Vincent Mason, aka Maceo, aka Plug 3.
I mean, that's just so creative.
I know. We're going to get into what those names mean later, but I have no evidence that this is the case, but I hypothesize that Plug 1, Plug 2, and Plug 3 is literally the plug on the mixing board that they were plugging into. Like, I'm the first plug, you're the second plug, I'm the third plug.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Yeah.
Yeah. And it probably, you know, keeps it easy. If it's like, listen, I'm always channel 1. Just always plug me into 1. I'm plug 1. You know? Yeah. That way you don't got to reset all the shit every time.
That's great.
You know, just that little speculation made me like him a good bit more.
Yeah. You get the sense that they were like, you know, actually doing it and like really working on it in the studio. So despite De La Soul being a trio, there is a very important member that was not officially a member of the group, but it was their producer, and it's the aforementioned Prince Paul. And so we're actually going to start the story out talking about Prince Paul. So Paul Houston, aka Prince Paul, was born in Amityville on Long Island in New York in 1967. Now, Amityville is a town mostly known for the book and subsequent movies about the Amityville Horror, which was an incident where a father named Ronald DeFeo Jr. shot and killed all 6 members of his family in 1974. Cool. And then a different family moved into the house a year later and claimed they were terrorized by evil spirits. And then some fucking asshole wrote a book that apparently took massive liberties with this story and turned it into a media franchise. So, you know, good for them. I'm sure Amityville would much rather be known as the birthplace of De La Soul and not the place of a brutal murder and haunting. But, you know, here we are.
I mean, to be fair, I only knew it was about a haunted house. I didn't know anything about the murder.
Yeah, it was like a legit murder that actually happened when Paul was living in Amityville. So I'm sure that was
nice.
A town. Yeah.
Good stuff.
So back to Paul. He is, by all accounts, an obsessive about music from a very early age. The claim from his parents is that he started collecting vinyl records at the age of 5 and was just super into listening to music all the time. By the time he was in the 5th grade, he had started DJing, using the turntables, doing that manual beat matching and scratching. And in the modern era, I think it's easy to lose sight of how much more difficult it was back in the day when you had 2 turntables and a fader and you had to like speed things up and slow things down to get the beats to match, and you had to manually know where on the record to drop the needle to get the scratch that you wanted. It's a very skilled activity. It's not something that you can just engage in. I tried to do it once or twice in college and it was fucking impossible. Like, I had no ability to do it whatsoever. So props to him.
I can concur. It's very much harder than you think. And that's assuming that you went out of your way to get the deck and have the records. I mean, you had to like go so much farther out of your way to even engage in activities then, and you don't have a YouTube tutorial to look at.
Yeah, totally.
And I'll say you can tell he's a record head because he has like Johnny Cash and like the Turtles, and like you must be a devourer of music to be able to recall parts to even sample for some of these songs.
And not only recall parts, but be able to be like, oh, that part probably fits with this other part of two completely disparate songs that nobody would ever think to put in the same sentence together. You have to have this just deep encyclopedic knowledge of music. And it sounds like from just a very early age, that's all that Paul wanted to do.
He's got Kraftwerk sample. I mean,
he goes fucking deep, man. Yeah. So he also gets into drum machines. And just another thing that especially back in the day, these were not user-friendly interfaces. This is not something you could just easily pick up on.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
Imagine if your microwave was a drum machine. It's basically like that.
Yeah. And also you have like a very dry, extremely tedious manual. That is the only thing that is telling you how to do it, as opposed to like, I can go on YouTube right now and figure out how to use my shit, or ask ChatGPT and it'll tell me in 5 minutes, you know?
Yeah.
But it sounds like he's just always making beats, always playing and learning his equipment, always searching out records to sample. He's like a real obsessive. And probably helped that in middle school, his music teacher was none other than Everett Collins, who was the drummer for the Isley Brothers, who ends up being his middle school music teacher, which that guy did not handle his finances well. That's what he ended up doing.
Yeah, seriously, dude.
Yeah.
The Isley Brothers rock, dude.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think they're on the list, but they don't get enough credit, I feel, generally.
Yeah, that also means that he probably was like a road dog for a while, because they were out there playing. I think they might still be playing. It might be one of those bands where they're trotting out the fucking desiccated corpses of those guys.
I take it back. They are on the list. We'll get some.
All right. Hell yeah.
1973's 3+3
Is it like Johnny Valance or what? That guy that they pull up and he's just like, "Where am I?" And they hand him a microphone and he has to like try to get to the song.
Oh no, who's that guy? Grease.
Frankie Valli.
Frankie Valli.
Yeah. So in 1984. When Paul is 17 years old, he ends up catching the attention of some Brooklyn DJs, and he's invited to join their group called Stetsasonic, which I keep having to type out and say this name, Stetsasonic. It's not a good name, guys. You don't want your name to be a tongue twister.
No.
But Stetsasonic is actually credited as potentially being the first band to play with a full band and DJs and rappers when they would play live shows. Yeah.
Hey.
You would think that hip hoppers would be the first to understand the importance of a euphonious and easy to say name.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe there's a reason why these guys didn't break through into the wider audience. So that's like 17. Paul's still a senior in high school at this time. He's in Amityville, but he's got this cool job. You know, he's in a band. He's in a cool, like, Brooklyn-based band. But when he is at school in Amityville, he ends up, you know, kind of on the lookout for some like-minded kids to hang out with. And so, hey, smash cut to Amityville Memorial High School in the cafeteria. And there's just these three guys banging on the table, trying to make beats and rhyming over it. And that is Kelvin, David, and Vincent. They are fast kind of becoming friends, and because they have this mutual love of music and mutual love of hip hop. So this is like 83, 84. And like, frankly, that is what is considered like the beginning of the golden age of hip hop. So it is this kind of new, exciting art form. It's akin to when punk hit, you know, like it's this thing that like the cool kids are into. And if you're into it, you're really into it. And so they're really, really into it. And, you know, we've covered this before. Hip hop started in the Bronx in the 70s. So it's a New York made thing, but it's very much a New York City thing. It's not necessarily a complete middle of the road suburbs out on Long Island thing, but it gives a little bit of danger to it, and it gives a little bit of excitement to it. So, you know, Kelvin, David, and Vincent, they are completely enamored with this evolving sound. And so they are walking around the school, freestyling all the time, rhyming. They're working on some stuff at with their own shitty little tape machines, trying to make beats and stuff like that. And one thing, I just want to take a little diversion here, because I feel like this is something that doesn't get appreciated enough. And it's that these guys were really cutting their teeth as lyricists and as rhymers. And I think very much like stand-up comedians, a lot of people look at rappers and are like, oh, they're just talking. I know how to talk. Like, nobody looks at a violinist and is like, I can fucking do that. Like, you look at that and you're like, oh, that's a skill that I don't have. But you hear a stand-up comedian, you hear like a rapper, and you're like, oh, I can talk. I can probably do that. But it is not easy. And the amount of times in my musical career where somebody's been like, oh, no, I'm actually a pretty good rapper. And then like the second that they actually try to execute on it, they're so fucking terrible. It is laughably bad.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, there are certain skills like that you just think are plug and play, but the reality is they took just as many hours of practice to get good at.
Totally. Like I said, like nobody heckles a concert pianist because they're like, oh, they're doing something that I can't do. But people will heckle a fucking stand-up comic or even a rapper. They'll talk shit to rappers while they're rapping because they just feel like, oh yeah, well, you're talking, I'm talking. What's the difference here, man?
Right.
So you get this group of music obsessed kids and they end up making a demo for one of their songs called Plug Tunin', which actually ends up on this album in a more cleaned up version. But they send that over to Prince Paul because they know he's in this cool band, this cool Brooklyn based band. And they're like, hey man, like we know you from around the area. You've DJ'd shows and stuff like that. How about you give a listen to our demo? And Prince Paul is like, hey man, that's pretty fucking good. So Prince Paul is a senior at the time. Vincent, aka Maceo, is a freshman. Kelvin, aka Posdanus, is a sophomore, and David Trugoy is a junior. So they're all separated by a year, but Paul recognizes that they have this sort of talent and shared love of hip hop. Now, Paul and Vincent actually kind of knew each other. So Paul and Maceo kind of know each other because Maceo also had that same drummer from the Isley Brothers as a music teacher back in the day. And he ended up connecting the two of them and just like, hey, you're both DJs. Like, because at the time, Maceo, aka Vincent, was making a lot of these beats. And so he's putting together these beats. They kind of know each other. Paul is older. He's further on in his career. And Vincent really looks up to him, and they are thrilled because Paul is like, hey, man, this like shit sounds pretty good. Let's check it out.
Do you think that Isley Brothers drummer is just in between? He's at the nadir of his life. Like the Isley Brothers have just stopped touring at the end of the 70s, and now he has no money, but it's before Ice Cube uses their sample and Today Was a Good Day when he's going to start getting mailbox money.
Well, I don't know because he wasn't like the only drummer for the Isley Brothers. He just had played drums for the Isley Brothers on some albums and stuff like that. So he might have never gotten a taste of any of that money.
Oh, I see. Yeah, good point. I guess he's not necessarily an Isley.
Yeah. So the one thing that I found was like really interesting, and Prince Paul is a very charming guy as well. And in an interview, he was like, hey man, listen, like I recognize it. I'm a nerd. But even I was like, these guys are fucking nerds. Like, they were apparently just super weird and super nerdy. And he was like taken aback by how nerdy they were. Vincent, he said Vincent was kind of like, not super nerdy. He was a little bit more of a tough guy.
I mean, would a jazz player say that to another jazz player? Like why? It's just funny that's like that would matter, like kind of coolness or nerdiness.
A jazz player wouldn't say it to another jazz player, but like a punk.
I mean, I would say they're all nerds.
Yeah, yeah, all nerds.
I think I sense that's almost a term of endearment in the anecdote you just said, because he's acknowledging that he has a lot of that nerdiness, right. and then you're able to recognize it in another.
Yes.
But yes, to your point, Marty, I agree that it is a little somewhat by genre. There must be nerdy punks though, right? Where do they go? What do they do?
I think they're all just trying to deny their nerdiness and cover it up by being fucking hardcore, man. But yeah,
there's no nerdy football players though.
Well, Marty, that is a fantastic segue into this week's edition of By the Numbers.
Hell yeah.
The first number that we are going to throw out is 27, as in Vincent Mason, aka Maceo's son, Trey Mason, wore the number 27 when he was a running back for the Los Angeles Rams.
God damn, that was a good segue. I didn't even know that.
That was wild.
Yeah. I wasn't going to go to buy the numbers for a while, but you just called it right out, so I figured we had to jump into that one. Man, the next number on our list is over 60, as in there are more than 60 samples used on this album. And that almost tanked its legacy. Because of the issues clearing samples, it was hard to get De La Soul on any streaming platform until 2023. Not just for this album, but for all of their subsequent albums, because the samples that Tommy Boy cleared, they only cleared for physical media. And when it came time for streaming, they had to renegotiate all of the streaming royalties. And it got to the point where De La Soul was going to make essentially no money.
Isn't that sad?
So dumb.
Steely Dan, for example, we'll talk about them. They made buku bucks from their recordings.
Yep.
Let Kraftwerk come after them for a little cash.
I'm not sure that money and success equals a happy life. See Donald Fagen, the grumpiest bastard ever.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. It's
Yeah.
just sad that someone would be so, and it's probably lawyers that were involved, you know. And,
Sure.
But it's just disappointing because the combination of these samples doesn't really sound, except for the one song, sound like
It's no longer the original
Exactly.
thing. I totally agree.
Exactly.
It is.
Exactly.
It's truly a new creation,
Exactly.
and I think this is the best kind of sampling that we can think of that we have praised in the past, because they made something truly new with it.
Yep.
And yeah, I do agree. It's sad, and it probably is a Kafka-esque bureaucracy at work that you kind of can't untangle yourself from, as opposed to individual artists really truly caring about this individual case, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, the next number is 2.5, as in the Turtles sued De La Soul for $2.5 million in 1991. That's 1991 money, by the way.
Man.
So 2.5 million in 1991 money is like $10 million today.
How many dozen eggs could that buy today?
Ooh, like 6? So they sampled their song You Showed Me on the track Transmitting Live from Mars. Now, they use such a small snippet of it, and it is so slowed down. It is barely recognizable. And there was an interview with that fucking lawyer for the Turtles who was like, we feel like this is clearly an infringement on our rights, and this does not this falls under like artistic integrity. You're like, shut the fuck up, you fucking asshole. Like,
That's disgusting.
it's
Yeah.
really gross.
Fuck those guys. It sounds like a divorce or something is happening. Something really bad is happening in one of their lives.
Yeah. So the funny thing about it is that Tommy Boy Records, very early on, with one of the first records that they put out, they got sued for samples. And so the third hire that Tommy Boy had was a lawyer who all that they did was cleared samples for them. Now, they would go to the artists and say, what did you sample? The artist would tell them, they would go get it cleared. Apparently, De La Soul just forgot that they sampled that Turtles song and didn't put it on the list. And so everything else got cleared except for that Turtles song.
Did they win the
came
lawsuit?
after them. So they ended up settling out of court for $100,000.
That's
Wow.
still a lot of money.
Wait, so that means, but let's think about the chain of events then that would have led to the Turtles even knowing that that was their snippet of a song, especially if it's as disguised as you say, because I certainly didn't hear a Turtles song in there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know how it even got on their radar. Maybe it was just like, hey, there's a buzz that this is a really sample heavy album, and like,
I bet that's what it is. I bet they were just
Yeah.
predatory lawyers
Oh, yeah.
who were like, hip hop is using samples. I will intently listen or have my interns do it
Right.
Yeah.
and see what I can come fish for.
Yep.
yeah, so they settled for $100,000, and like everybody has said, like, we would have just cut it. You never would have noticed if we just cut that little snippet out of the song. Like, it was so non-integral, but yeah, they caught us.
It was
with our pants
probably
down.
all like wrapped up on like one piece of tape, and so you'd have to make the whole song again, you know?
Well, no, this was like after the fact. They were like, they just made a mistake.
But I'm
in
just
not
saying,
clearing it.
even if they
Yeah.
even if they were like, hey, cut it out, they're like, oh, sorry, it's already merged with our other,
Yeah.
25 samples on this track.
Well, this is probably also after the album sold like the majority of the copies
Sure,
that it was going
sure,
to sell.
right.
The next number is 500,000, as in 500,000 units of this album sold in Europe, which was more than any hip hop album had ever sold in Europe.
Damn.
It really caught on with the Euro crowd. They liked it a lot.
That's interesting. Yeah, I always assume that whenever we cover one of these cornerstones of hip hop, that our listeners in UK and Europe are going to have no clue what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, this was apparent. I think, this, you could consider this very jazzy. And so I can see this fitting into the sort of
fair enough.
European milieu. And the last number is 2, as in the single Me, Myself, and I was only the second number 1 song on the Billboard Hot Rap 100 charts, which had just started in March of 1989. The band hated that song. We'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah, well, I want to know what the first one is,
It's probably like MC Hammer or some shit like that. No, MC Hammer would have come later. And the last number that we are going to cover is the number 90 and the number 10. As in, after all of the samples were cleared for streaming in 2016, mind you, Tommy Boy Records said, great, we got all the samples cleared for streaming. We're going to put it out there. The royalty split is going to be 90% to Tommy Boy Records, 10% to De La Soul. And they were like, what the fuck? Absolutely no. That led to another fight, which meant that their stuff did not get on any streaming platforms until 2023.
Jeez.
Which has had the unfortunate result of kind of erasing them from this period of hip hop and the general knowledge of this period of hip hop. Their legacy has really been muted by their inability to be accessible, because even for a while they stopped printing physical media of it for decades because they were worried about this shit.
Isn't that such a scary idea about our modern society? Is that if you're not on streaming, kind of like if you're not, similar for films or TV shows, if you're not on one of the major platforms, you effectively don't exist. Yeah. And Spotify or the streaming services for music are kind of like the Library of Alexandria. If it ain't filed there, how's anyone going to access it?
Unless you're going to go out and buy a physical copy of it, which I actually bought for my now 11-year-old nephew. He said he wanted to get into some hip hop, and I was like, I bought this album for him last year for not this past Christmas, it's Christmas before. And I was like, you know what? I think this is a good one, because there's nothing on here that you're going to be like, what? I can't listen to this.
There's not one single curse word.
There might be like an ass on there or something like that. Maybe something like that. But there's not what you would expect from hip hop.
No, totally. And of course, physical media, you could argue, even is having a resurgence, but it just makes it so much harder for a modern generation to even discover it if it's not there.
Totally. And we've talked about this era before where, I didn't have much money. I was relatively poor. I would definitely go and spend 20 of the $35 I had to my name on a fucking CD and then be like, God, this sucks. I'm so pissed off that I bought this. Why did I buy it?
Totally.
Yeah, it was tough.
It was a big risk at the time, and we still did it. And then we passed if it was good, we passed them out as burned CDs, of course.
Totally.
But yeah, if you got a bad one, man, that was
waste of money, sadness.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, so let's get back to our story here. Prince Paul has listened to their demos. He likes what he hears. And he said in most cases, the guys from De La Soul, primarily Maceo, would have come up with a loop. And he says, I'm going to take it, I'm going to clean it up, and I'm going to put a lot more layering on top of it. But a lot of the beat was there, and a lot of the lyrics were already there. But he's also then writing beats for them to rap over. And it doesn't sound like this was like a super organized thing. It sounds like they were just kind of enjoying being friends and hanging out together. Paul really just wanted to make beats. They really just wanted to rap. The band that Paul was in at the time, that stupid fucking name that I'm going to have to go look up again because it's so terrible and unrememberable. Stetsonic, yeah, is consisting of much older guys. And so he has much less juice and his ideas aren't really being taken seriously in that band. The guys from De La Soul are all younger and they're like ready for his ideas. They're looking to him. So he kind of really likes being in that position where he is kind of the mentor to these kids. And, I think that you can kind of feel the excitement on the album, there is just this breeziness to it that I think only comes across when you can tell that the guys are like genuinely having fun, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. It feels loose and it feels like they're having fun. And
Yeah,
that
totally.
helps your enjoyment of it, certainly.
It doesn't feel like it's made for anyone else other than their enjoyment.
100%. The theme running through all of this, the Daisy Age, which stands for the inner sound, y'all. What the fuck does that mean? I've been researching these dudes for the entire week. I have no idea what that means. How is a casual listener supposed to like be like, oh, the inner sound, y'all? Of course, there we go. The Daisy Age. So they're kind of this clique that are hanging out together. Paul's graduated high school at this point. They're still hanging out together and they're making music. But important to our story is that Paul's group Stetsasonic gets signed to Tommy Boy Records in 1986. So now Paul has a connection to Tommy Boy. The guys in De La Soul through Paul have a connection to a legitimate player in the industry. And actually, they've been making music together for a while. And one of Paul's bandmates from Stetsasonic calls up Tommy Boy Records and is like, hey, Prince Paul's been working with these fucking kids making this stuff. And like, I listened to it and like, it's pretty fucking good. Like, you should check this out. Totally does them a solid and sets up a meeting with the woman, Monica Lynch, who was the president of Tommy Boy Records. And she says, man, this is like really shittily recorded. It sounds terrible. It sounds like you recorded it on like with like playground sand all over your fucking record or something like that. But it's also really interesting and really unique. And so she brings it to the founder of Tommy Boy, Tom Silverman, and he agrees. Again, this is where he gave that quote where he's like, I felt like it was unique and important and I wanted to support it, whether or not it was going to be successful. So again, kudos to him. They get a meeting with Tommy Boy Records and they come in and the three guys come in. They're dressed like total fucking nerds. You know, this is the period of time with like black leather and chains and like the rappers are all like looking kind of tough and edgy. And these guys are walking in with like tucked in paisley shirts and like weird ass haircuts. And they're like, hi, I'm Paz the Noose. I'm Trugoy the Dove and I'm Maceo. And they're like, yeah, okay. Maceo, I get. What the fuck is Paz the Noose and Trugoy the Dove? And he's like, oh, well, Paz the Noose is sop sound backwards. And Trugoy is yogurt backwards because I really like yogurt. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, you nerds?
What does sound sop even refer to? What is that even referring to?
I have no fucking idea. I have no idea.
Like, you just made it more confusing in your explanation.
Yeah. And it's not like Paz the Noose is like, oh, well, I mean, whatever you got to do to get to the name Paz the Noose, that's what you do. It was just like sitting right there for the taking. Right. So, you know, but they are like, listen, you're nerdy, but you're unique. And everything is kind of sounding sort of the same. This is like the period of like Eazy-E, Too Short, Eric B. and Rakim, Run DMC. Dudes trying to be cool. These guys were obviously not trying to be cool. And almost like because they're not trying to be cool, they're falling ass backwards into being cool. And so they signed this deal with Tommy Boy Records, and they are assigned an A&R guy named Dante Ross, who at the time was a self-described broke alcoholic weed dealer who was one step away from being homeless.
Nice.
And yeah, things are off to a great start. Between selling weed and trying to get laid, he takes on the task of trying to wrangle De La Soul into making an album, which is difficult because even they're like, we're just kids, barely out of high school. I think at the time, Maceo was still in his senior year of high school. And they had no ambitions, right?
Can we just say that to be a broke weed dealer, you got to smoke a lot of weed because that stuff sells itself, man.
Yeah. Well, he also was like, I would carry a gun everywhere. And like, he sounded like he was like selling serious weed too. So like, if you're selling serious weed, maybe he's just that much of an
I don't know
alcoholic.
how anyone doesn't make money doing that.
Yeah, seriously. So Prince Paul is really the one that everyone gives a lot of credit for making the album come what it became. Because he was always sort of pushing the guys to explore these weird ideas. Like apparently they would come and be like, I don't know, man, like I got this kind of idea and it's like a little weird. And he's like, no. Let's dig into that. Let's figure out how far down this weird rabbit hole we can go. And that ended up with like, songs about talking to fucking fish and rabbits and squirrels and stuff like that. Like guy comes in, he's like, oh, I'm like, maybe I'd like talk to like an animal in the yard or something like that. And it's like, yeah, dude, let's fucking write 3 verses. Let's get this going, man.
What are you waiting for?
Somebody else is going to do it if you don't do it first. Let's get it done. So they record the album that becomes their debut album, 3 Feet High and Rising. It's released on February 6, 1989. It becomes a pretty instant hit. It has that kind of universal crossover appeal that a lot of hip hop at the time didn't have. In the era of Public Enemy, a lot of the groups were trying to put out records with a message, and people were sort of like, hey, this is refreshingly not in my face. Like, it's refreshing that there's no message here. And so this goofy kind of innocent approach of just a bunch of enthusiastic kids, it played really well to white audiences. But the thing that is actually kind of truly awesome is that black audiences and even black artists like Public Enemy and Run DMC were like, De La Soul are fucking awesome. I love these guys. These are a bunch of lovable dorks. You should totally listen to their shit.
It's kind of like how, what are those like prankster guys that do like pranks in New York?
Oh, the Practical Jokers?
Impractical Jokers.
Impractical Jokers.
Yeah, like those guys are embraced by like the larger comedy community, which I always think is funny.
Yeah, because they're not comedians. Right.
But I guess they are enough to be embraced by the larger community.
I think it says something about the health of a community at a time. And this just sounds like it would have been a tight-knit New York hip-hop community before you got to a lot of the splintering that would come, right?
Totally. And, Marty, very much like, I think the stance towards the Impractical Jokers is like, hey, funny is funny.
Right.
I don't care how you get there.
Yep.
I think these guys were just like, hey, good is good. And I don't care how you get there.
Yep.
This is good. This is good stuff. And so they have an album that has been released. Guys like Big Daddy Kane are singing their praises. They're playing in tough clubs in the Bronx, which is the birthplace of rap, and they're getting great responses from these audiences. They're also playing Uptown for like the rich white audiences, getting a great response out of there. They come off as lovable, really enthusiastic kids having a blast.
Trugoy's eating yogurt in the green room.
Just all the yogurt you can possibly imagine.
No alcohol needed. I just need some Dannon.
It kind of reminds me of like skateboard culture because, skateboarding got popular with like Tony Hawk, token white guy would ride vert ramps. But then New York and all these kind of like concrete jungles had their own versions of skateboarding that turned into a whole different thing that ended up being largely accepted by the entire like world. If that makes sense.
And I know that from that documentary about Gator.
The
guy who his life fell apart because he could not make the transition from vert skateboarding to street skateboarding. Yeah.
Jeez.
Oh, and then he murders a woman. It's a great documentary. You should totally watch it. Within 3 months of its release, so in May 1989, 3 Feet High and Rising has gone gold in the U.S., selling 500,000 copies. De La Soul are feeling good. Not entirely good, because they gain a lot of their popularity behind the single Me, Myself, and I. Now, in the run-up to releasing this album in 1989, they had released 3 singles. So before the album was even released, they were putting some singles out there. Songs that they liked a lot, songs that they were much happier with. They released the singles Plug Tunin', Potholes in My Lawn, and Buddy before the album ever came out. They're getting ready to release the album. They submit it to Tommy Boy, and Tommy Boy says, I don't hear a hit. Go back in and write me something new. And so they write Me, Myself, and I. And that ends up becoming their signature song. They get a lot of popularity behind that. And they are not thrilled about that. They thought it was cheesy. They thought it wasn't their style. And when it became their breakout hit, they really resented it. And when they played it at shows, before they would play the song, they would lead the crowd in a chant that said, "We hate this song."
Oh, God.
Before they would play it. Yeah.
Wow.
They do sound like they kind of were maybe a little contrarian. And
I don't think it's really any different in tone than the other songs.
Yeah, they adapted this song from the previous title, Plug 1, Plug 2, and Plug 3.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So they also start to resent how the record label is choosing to market them, because the record label essentially heard the Daisy Age and was like, oh, you're hippies. And so they started marketing them as hippies. That album cover, that iconic album cover, they did not like that at all. They did not want that to be the album cover at all because they thought it was too pastel hippie shit. They wanted apparently like them to be on an elevator and the elevator's doors to be open, but it was going down. So just the top halves of their faces were showing. It's much worse aesthetic than what they had, but they didn't mind it at first that people kept calling them hippies. But eventually, when like every interview was like, tell us about your hippie philosophy, they'd be like, fuck this. We're not hippies. God damn it. It got so much that they released their next album. They call it De La Soul is Dead. And it features on the front cover 3 dead daisies in a broken flower pot. Because they were essentially like, you broke our spirit, you broke our soul. We had this whole Daisy Age thing and you turned it into some hippie bullshit. And so fuck that. De La Soul is dead.
Yeah, because it was so easy to understand that reference.
Of course. The Daisy. I mean, come on. Danner sound, y'all. Of course. Yeah. So this is their only album on the list. We're not going to go too much into their career because it did go on for quite some time. They released a total of 8 albums as a trio and 1 album with just Paz the Noose and Trugoy. And they are considered the founding group of the alternative hip hop movement. I think we have gabbed enough about the backstory. Let's get into the songs.
Let's do it.
All right.
First song we're going to talk about is the first real track on the album. And you know what? I can't believe that I did not mention this before. And it's going to sully your image of the album. This is credited with making skits popular on hip hop albums.
I was wondering about that.
I did read that, and that didn't help my enjoyment.
Because we talked about the Fugees a couple weeks ago and how there's kind of these skits in between songs, and I wondered if how often that happened before this album.
Never.
Well,
this is the one.
Stevie Wonder's interlude in Living for the City is kind of like a skit.
Sure,
I know it's not exactly the same thing, but they're
Yeah.
kind of drawing back into 70s references, right?
Yeah, I can give you that. I maybe am more talking specifically about skits in hip hop. And apparently after they recorded the album, they went into the studio and recorded all the skits in one day. You definitely can't tell that they weren't rehearsed.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't believe. I think the most shocking thing is that you could hear this as an example of something and go, we should do more of that.
Yeah. I also think that like they were like, guys, the album's only 62 minutes long. How about we cram another 5.5 minutes onto this album?
That is
Jesus
so
Christ.
ridiculous. I know that you don't know when you're making the album that people are going to be listening to it 40 years from now. I understand that you can't conceptualize that. That's going to change the kinds of things you're going to do. But you do know you're printing like 1,000+ copies.
Yeah.
And you're going to distribute it. So it just seems so bizarre that like jokes, they just get stale. Even if they're good.
Even like the
good.
Wu-Tang ones where they're like, I'll cut your eyeballs out and all that shit. It's like, okay.
They're some of the best ones.
They are the best
but
ones.
they're still...
Yeah, it gets old.
I could do without them.
I mean, you are describing literally the best rap skit of all time, which is, I'm going to sew your asshole clothes and keep feeding you and feeding you and feeding you. Like, that's funny. That's at least funny. But this is not. So anyway, the first song is a skit. This is the first real track on the album. It is The Mad.
There's a lot you could say about this song. I would say that it's funny that the sample is like clipped in a weird way that you immediately hear. It's just like an awkward loop where you can clear the tape go between repetitions.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know why. I don't know if you guys thought this, but I was like, when I heard this song, I was like, oh, it sounds like a Smash Mouth song. And then I was like, oh, it's that song, I'm free to do what I want. The Soup Dragons.
Yeah. Glasgow's finest. This is pretty close to a Schoolhouse Rock jam.
It is a Schoolhouse Rock jam.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. It's literally 3 is the magic number, is a Schoolhouse Rock song that they cribbed from for the chorus of it. It's the same melody and everything like that. They're using the beat from it.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
That's okay. Well, it checks out.
I think that's pretty baller, by the way, to like open up your album with a Schoolhouse Rock jam.
Yeah, I think the beat's great. It's fun. Listen, I mean, bottom line is we've been saying it, but the album I found a little hard to listen to. The Focus List I found quite easy to listen to.
Yeah, totally.
And enjoyed it much more when I just kind of cut the fat from the album and got to the fun stuff. So yeah, this is fun. I like the Punky Brewster reference. I love these old references that like mean nothing to people under 30.
This song is melodic more than the other ones. They're kind of singing the song.
Yeah.
More so than some of the other ones, which I thought was kind of unique. It's almost like an alternative rock song or like a 90s or early 2000s pop song.
And this song contains samples from the infamous James Brown Funky Drummer loop. That is the drum beat that's in here. But they also sampled Johnny Cash's 5 Feet High and Rising. That's where the title of the album came from. And the Eddie Murphy track Hit by a Car is also sampled for this. It's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Now, I dig the overall feel. I think that they did a good job of producing that singing vocal that you're talking about, Marty, where it's like a beefy. It sounds like they did a couple of tracks. It's kind of like multi-tracked.
Yep.
The one thing I will say is that, and we have talked about this before, like the manual scratching just did not age particularly well. Like I know that it's hard to do, and I know that it is inherently impressive to see somebody do it, but when it's just like what's on the tape, I think that it goes on for too long,
right?
And you're just kind of like,
like if you didn't know,
I could do that with my iPhone, right?
If
now,
you didn't know what it was, you'd be like, "What the fuck?"
Exactly. You'd be like, "It's not really all that impressive. So why are you focusing so much on it towards the end of the song?" But they don't overly belabor it, but it's okay.
I do like how they sometimes, at the end of a song that's very repetitive, go off and do weird stuff at the end and add different samples and stuff.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
And this is another one, just very, very rich sampling. A lot of stuff going on. There's 10 songs that are sampled on this one. So there's a lot going on in this track.
Yeah, it's cool.
All right. The next song that we're going to talk about is the song Take It Off. I should put a song in quotes.
Yeah, are we calling this a song? This is a big upgrade from Skit, basically.
Like I said, throw shit at the wall and include it on the album.
I put this on here because you can't talk about this album without talking about this, because this is like 35% of the album.
Right.
It's just this type of shit.
Right.
That is not a song.
True. Yeah, it's not even just the skits. This seems like it's intended to be a song. And again, what's weird and frustrating about it is I do think the underpinning sounds cool. It's got that cool dry drum sound, organic beat sample,
and it's got a delay on their voices, which is kind of cool. Like,
but then it just feels so underbaked because they have all this weird off-key singing, which feels so unnecessary. Because from the track, I can tell that they're aware that having them all sing at the same time covers up the off-key singing.
Yeah,
because they do that a bunch, and then every once in a while, they'll just have one guy singing, and he sounds totally off-key.
Sounds terrible. Yeah, terrible. I will say, it is kind of refreshing that it is a hip hop song called Take It Off, and it is not telling a woman to take her clothes off. It's instead a bunch of like nerdy dudes calling out fashion crimes.
Right, exactly. Yeah. They're telling the people to take off the popular things of the day, Yeah,
take that Jordache off, Marty. Come on. Yeah. But this is probably the best of the not even song fragment ideas that somehow ended up littered all over this album. So
sure,
I thought it was important to call it out,
Fair enough.
Not a single.
Not a single. No. The next song we're going to talk about is the song that we played at the beginning of the show. Let's dive back into I Know.
I cut this dance to introduce myself as the chosen one to speak. Let me lay my hand across yours and aim a kiss upon your cheek. The name's Plug 2, and from the soul I bring you the daisy of your choice. May it be filled with a pleasure principle in circumference to my voice. About those other Jennies I reckoned with, lost them all like a homework excuse. This time the magic number is 2, cause it takes 2, not 3 to seduce. My destiny of love is brought to an apex. Sex is a mere molecule in this world of lust that I have for you. It's true.
Finally, validation of the raw power, creativity, and infinite cool of America's most important cultural output. Yes, I'm talking about Steely Dan.
Yes.
Oh, fucking yes.
It's so funny. It's like Steely Dan Peg sample, but not quite. They do something to it to make it not so obvious from just ripping off from the album.
Well, if it wasn't for that, I know I love you better sample, nobody would have known that this is Peg. I would have known that this is Peg because they sample the coolest part of the bass from the chorus of not from like the pre-chorus of Peg. That
yeah.
It's the coolest part of that bass line by far.
Also, it's so funny that Steely Dan got sued to shit for ripping off a Keith Jarrett song on the same album on Asia.
No shit.
Oh yeah, and
that.
lost.
And lost.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah. But you know what? I think Steely Dan actually were pretty cool with this song being used, with Peg being used in this song. And I don't think that they gave them too much shit. And Fagan has actually been pretty cool about that.
They gave Otis Redding a writing credit.
Otis Redding had to get a writing credit. And I'm pretty sure that only happened for the digital release. So I think that I know Otis Redding had to get like an above the fold writing credit, because like Fagan and Becker got writing credits, but like Otis Redding got like a primary writing credit for it. And I think that just using that whistling part, come on.
Yeah.
That seems a little litigious to be pushing for that.
I would have to agree. And although the whistle was a very nice touch, I found it very pleasant in the song.
One of the things that I actually really dug is that the sample that they use, and I think that is it Make This Young Lady Mine by the Mad Lads? That horn sample, that da-na-na-na-na-na. Like if I didn't know Peg, I would have thought that was a part of the Steely Dan song.
Yeah,
it fits so well together.
It fits. Yeah. You're totally right. Yeah, it fits really well. I mean, I think that's the real artistry of these productions is you're puzzle piecing stuff together in a way that is just so not obvious, and you really are creating something brand new.
Yeah. Like, I love Steely Dan. There's no way I would have thought of any of that. Like, listening to Peg, I never would have been like, oh, like, let's combine this shit with, Otis Redding and some fucking obscure-ass song from a British band from 20 years ago, you know?
I just want to say, maybe for the audience's benefit, that what we're being internally consistent about is that we appreciate effort. Mm-hmm. And when you compare this to other quote unquote sampled tracks, like this word sampling is a little too big of an umbrella term, sadly, because it seems like it can also refer to just playing a Police hit song and then rapping over it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not the same thing as this.
Hey, just to correct the record, the Keith Jarrett lawsuit is about the song Gaucho from the album Gaucho. Okay. But everything else was correct.
I knew about that one.
Oh, sorry.
All our Steely Dan nerd fans were yelling at their speakers.
Wrong album, loser.
Let's go on to the next song that we're going to talk about. This is the song that was the demo that caught the attention of Prince Paul and of Tommy Boy Records, Plug Tunin'.
The first time around, you didn't quite understand our new style to speak.
Don't worry, we can fix that right now.
So why don't you all just grab your bag?
Come on board, hoist the anchor, and we'll be off.
Plug one, plug two, plug one, plug two, plug one, plug two, plug one. Answering any offer service, prerogative, praise positively, I'm acquitted. Enemies publicly shame my utility. After the battle, then writtens, I'm with it. Simply sue, well moved. If I don't like rude, transistors are never more shown with light. When vocal flow brings it all down in ruins. Due to a clue of a naughty noise called plug tuning.
Now, the original version of Plug Tunin' did not have the intro, which is Liberace from the Liberace TV show.
Really?
Yeah. And that is Liberace playing chopsticks in the middle of the song.
Wow.
That's the most important or well-known song in the history of music that he's talking about there is chopsticks.
I mean, I'll just say it again. The beat is great. Great texture, great sound. That little plinky little piano that comes in around 124. There's just so many cool things going on, and it's clearly so much work was put in to making it cool. And while I agree the flows are charming, the flow is like so repetitive and boring. I know that's a 2025 opinion, but I just kind of start to tune out because even though all these songs are pleasant, when I focus in on them, I can't get over the fact that it's just the same cadence again and again.
I hear you on the cadence issue. I actually put this song on here because I feel like if you go into the lyrics, there's a lot more rhyming complexity there. But you're right. The delivery is the same. It's just da 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 da. You know, like there's not a lot of differing textures in the delivery.
Yeah, it starts to feel like shticky at this point.
Yeah.
Where like they're trying maybe too hard.
They're not helping themselves. That you're 16 tracks into this album by this point, right?
It just wore me down. Yeah. That's really what the problem is. I'm buying the idea that it is revolutionary and that it was a first of its kind and that it was just unique and still is unique. And I think all that is really cool and admirable. But the reality is getting through an hour-plus long record with all these skits and bad half-baked tracks, it just wears you down.
Yeah, agreed. Well, let's not overly belabor this episode. Let's go on to the next song, or the final song on our focus list. It is their big hit, Me, Myself, and I.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, tell me, mirror, what is wrong? Can it be my daylight clothes or is it just my daylight song? What I do ain't make believe. People say I sit and try, but when it comes to being daylight, it's just me, myself, and I. It's just me, myself, and I.
Otherwise known as, what is it? This song sucks? Or
Yeah, we hate this song.
We hate this song? Yeah.
So they were friends with Q-Tip then?
Yeah, they were
That's-
friends with Q-Tip.
I guess that's what threw me off. That made me think that Q-Tip was already a star or a minor star on the record label or something because he appeared on this. That screwed with the timeline in my mind.
I mean, did he appear just for that 3 words or whatever?
No, he was on another song
okay.
with Jungle Brothers on this album because they were all part of that Native Tongues collective, and that's something we didn't get into in the story, mostly because we're going to have to cover it on the Tribe Called Quest albums that are still on the list. I think there might only be one more album on the list that we haven't covered, but Native Tongues were kind of just like a collective of guys that were all sort of doing stuff in the same time and in the same area. And so they were just friends, basically, you know, guys that they had like, you know, it's like it's essentially the version of like jamming together that we would have done like in college all the time. Like, hey, we just threw a jam session together. Had a guy come on over, you know?
I was surprised to learn that they hated it. I get the idea that artists don't like being pigeonholed or told that they need to write another song or, you know, then they feel trapped by whatever becomes their hit song. So it does resonate now that you explained it. But in my mind, I was thinking, oh, this does feel like it stands out a little bit. It's got those synth stings in the beat, which just separate it in my ear a bit more. Yeah. It's more aggressively like disco or something.
That's actually a Funkadelic song, not just Knee Deep. That's
Nice.
where that comes from. Yeah.
And then I kind of was thinking that it was a nice, pleasantly funny read on their 3 theme. A lot of this is themed about the fact that they're a threesome, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, that Me, Myself, and I as a reference to that is kind of funny to me.
Yeah, I think it's a fun little ditty, which is kind of what you could say about almost all of the songs on this album that are successful. Is they're like fun little ditties. They're not super serious. They're not revolutionary in terms of subject matter, but they're fun and it's a little self-deprecating, which I kind of like as well.
Sure.
And so I think it's successful. I agree with you, Rob. I don't quite understand the hate behind it. You know, it's like it gave you a career and a ton of money. So you can't really be that upset about it.
Certainly the only song I had heard from De La Soul before that. We didn't talk about our history with the album, but I was aware of this song from its play on MTV.
Yep.
But I had never listened to the album before this week.
Yeah, same here.
I was pretty familiar with I Know. It's just one of those songs that the first time I heard it, I was like, oh, that's a Steely Dan sample. That's a cool song. But if you had asked me name De La Soul's biggest hit, it would have been Me, Myself, and I. No question about it.
Of course, yeah.
All right. I would say we probably gabbed enough about this album. Let's go to the vote. I am in suspense, dear listeners. I have no idea what these guys are going to vote. I'm going to throw it first over to Marty.
Oh, I thought you were going to throw it to Rob first. God damn it.
Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot.
I mean, this is really, really hard for me because there's something mysterious about this album. I feel like there's something I'm not understanding or I'm not picking up. I think there's something going on. It's really hard for me. Oh, man.
Gun to your head, Marty. What are you picking?
This is the hardest one I've had in a long time. I'm going to say yes. This belongs on the list. I haven't listened to this much, just a couple times before recording this episode. But I feel like there's something unique and artistic and special and groundbreaking here. And even though I might not have I don't fully understand it, I think it's worthy of being on the list. So I'm going to go yes.
Okay. Rob, what do you say?
You know what? I came in feeling like listening to the album was not that pleasant an experience for me. I'm not the target demo, but I did want to like it, and I didn't really that much because for the reasons we described, because it's bloated and needs self-editing. However, through the course of your story, I'm convinced that it had a major influence and that we can file it under nerdy outsider art that is just itself unique. And those are things I generally want to support and that I think we should listen to more. So for those reasons, I'm a yes.
Awesome. I am kind of like both of you guys. I am in the I appreciate it more than I enjoyed it category. And I will also say that I think that there is a fantastic 10-song album lurking in this, 26 song monstrosity, right? So
I buy that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that if they had just gone through the self-editing process and just put like a solid 10 songs together, it could have been something that I would say I will listen to from front to back. I will listen to many songs from this album. And I do think, especially because their spot in history has been somewhat obscured because of the difficulty in accessing their material for a long time, I don't think a lot of people have heard them. And so I want to make sure that they are, they're a deserving part of the canon. So yeah, listen to the album. You might not listen to it again, but you should listen to it at least once. There you have it. Surviving members of De La Soul. Unfortunately, Trugoy the Dove died in 2023.
How'd he die?
But I don't know. God. I'm going to guess diabetes from all of the yogurt that he ate.
Oh, God.
Yogurt's got a lot of sugar in it, and not a lot of people know that. Well. But congratulations, guys. You are on the list. And, normally I'd say like a hip-hop group doesn't give a shit what a bunch of mid-40s white guys think about their album. But actually, we probably are like the exact target demo for fucking De La Soul. So, all right. Let's do just a few more things before we get our homework assignment for the week. And first, we're going to throw it on over to Rob, and he is going to reach his hand in that mailbag and pull us out a little missive.
Awesome. Yeah, I got a couple of good ones about our 9 Inch Nails episode. So listener Chris from New York writes, I've been loving your podcast ever since I started listening last year, and as someone who enjoys the pod and loves the downward spiral to bits, I was super excited when you chose that. It's an album that spoke to me like nothing else ever did. It's edgy, and that may be my 18-year-old self talking, but regardless, I love getting to talk about every last inch of this album. So I'm surprised you guys didn't talk more about the concept angle of the album, because I think that justifies why the track list is the way it is. There's no real wasted space on the album for me, and even the weaker tracks I can get behind because they push the plot of the album forward. I wanted to mention one other thing too, which is that I loved hearing you guys talk about Hurt. It gave me a lot of joy. It's my candidate for best song ever made, especially because of the unnerving elements. And being the nerd I am, it made me giddy that you brought up the static in the left channel. I'd say that detail was added to the story because at this point, Hurt is basically a post-mortem after our protagonist has committed suicide. So I've always imagined that represents the person's hearing being blown out after the gunshot.
Wow.
Nah,
Chris,
interesting.
Getting deep.
Dark.
Really interesting stuff. Thank you for the extra context, dark as it may have been. I thought that was an interesting read on that. And I just liked hearing about someone appreciating that we brought up such a nerdy detail as the static in the left channel.
Yeah, and how it kind of fades in and out. Yeah.
Yes.
I believe I said I was super annoyed by it, which I was.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah. Sounds like something I'd say.
We got one more here, and this is from, I'm going to call this person an unexpected listener. It's Katrina from Asheville, North Carolina. She writes, thanks for your insights on Trent Reznor and the Downward Spiral. I am a 65-year-old woman, but I have always been a fan of Nine Inch Nails.
Nice.
That's Trent's target demo, baby.
Yeah.
There have been several moments in my life when I've heard a song that froze me in my tracks and changed my life, but driving to work one morning in 1989 and hearing Nine Inch Nails on the UNC Chapel Hill College radio station was one of those moments. By the way, I was a DJ there from 1981 to 1987, and college radio stations like ours absolutely contributed to the surprise success of Nine Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine, which then led, of course, to the Downward Spiral. So I love listening to you guys take a deep dive into the album, pointing out its perfect imperfection, a trait that makes music so great. And she closes by saying, I also loved your episode about JC Superstar. It's an album I adored growing up. I actually wrote Tim Rice a letter once, and he even wrote me back. And lastly, she says, I gave my teenage son the book that your podcast is based on as a Christmas gift back when he was a teenager. He's 37 now. He plays in a band in Asheville, and he is the one that encouraged me to listen to your podcast.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow. It's a great story.
Great story. Love that context. Love hearing from a diverse set of listeners, and totally agree with all those points. That's super cool. So thank you. And anything you want to tell us about the albums we cover, what you enjoyed, what you want to correct us on, or stories from your life that relate to this music, because we all have those stories, of course, send it on over to 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you to everyone who wrote in, and thank you to everyone for listening to the end of the episode where we get our homework assignments. This is the most exciting part of the week for us. We got to figure out what we are going to listen to next. I have the Albinator here. It's been sitting in the corner eating yogurt and just being a big ass old nerd. And let's see if I can get it to put the spoon down and come on in here and spit out an album. So without any further ado, drum roll, please. We will be listening to the album is Close to the Edge by Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It's going to be a nice succinct one.
That is quite a change up.
Yeah. Well, very layered.
This might be the first time where the album has fewer tracks than our focus list rules provide for.
Wow, that's actually a good point. My goodness. That's going to be an interesting one. That is going to be an interesting one. Rob and I have some fun stories about Yes to tell.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Maybe it has 4 tracks or 3 tracks.
It has 3. It has. Don't ask me how I know.
Okay.
Don't ask me how I know.
This is Marty music through and through.
Oh, my
Marty, you
goodness.
definitely got to come
All right,
next
yeah,
week.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
Wow. As long as you don't cover Siberian Katru.
Tom, there are 3 tracks on the album.
We will be dissecting every track.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. So for next week, listen to Close to the Edge by Yes. I can already tell that so many of our Patreon fans are like Joy Division and like punk fans are just going to be squirming the entire time. Like, how long? This song's fucking 18 minutes long. Are you kidding me? Oh man, that's going to be a fun one. Thank you to everybody for listening. Thank you to everyone who wrote in. For everyone here at 1001 Album Complaints, I have been Tom.
I've been Marty.
And I'm Rob.
A boosh.